Well, good morning to everyone. I would like, first of all, my name is Richard Barat. I'm the Regional Hub Director of UNDP for Latin America and the Caribbean in the Regional Bureau for Latin America and the Caribbean. I would like, first of all, to welcome all participants to this webinar, the webinar that is focused on the virtual training that you are all participating in on Well-Being Beyond Income Toolkit for Application of SDGs to National Realities. We have members of governments in the Caribbean participating, country offices, including some of our senior managers in the region, academia, of course, experts and consultants, as well as some colleagues from the Regional Bureau, both in New York and here in the Regional Hub in Panama. I also like to welcome and thank the teachers and technical team that has been directly involved in preparing this training and this webinar. I would like, first of all, just to share the format. We're going to start by opening remarks from our Assistant Secretary General, Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean of UNDP, and followed by some of complementary remarks that I will have. We're going to have then a short presentation by a regional advisor, which is Mr. Ken Roach, who's one of the authors of the Caribbean Human Development Report and teacher of the training. We're going to conclude with a questions and answers session and technical doubts moderated by authors of the Regional Human Development Report, economists and professors of this training, Eduardo Ortiz and Maria Jose Abud. So that's basically the format of this webinar. Again, I thank you everyone for participating, and I'm handing over to Ms. Jessica Fayeta, our Regional Director. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I think I am live now. I want to also add my thanks and my welcome to the representatives from the governments, from our country offices, from Latin America, but particularly in this case from the Caribbean. We have tomorrow another webinar that is focused in Latin America, mostly in Spanish, and some of the government participants to this virtual training that also joined a physical training that was held last year in Antigua, Guatemala. So thank you again for following, for your interest and your participation. Some of our government participants have been working with us, with the UNDP offices in the Caribbean, in preparing both the launch of the Human Development Report for the Caribbean, or the elaboration of what we call MAPS mission, the mainstreaming, acceleration, and policy support missions that are meant to support countries in identifying the entry points and the roadmap towards the implementation of the SDGs. We have already a very good collaboration in some cases, and we are also starting a new path with new possibilities with other countries. So we are very excited in supporting the countries in the Caribbean to implement their commitments of the Agenda 2030. And I know they have had a very strong voice in this agenda, and we hope that we can add to some of this support. We also have some of our colleagues from the UNDP offices. They had also, some of them participated in the Guatemala workshop, working very closely with their government counterparts, and also helped in the launch. So some of you already know each other in person, even though we're here virtually. And in both cases, government and UNDP staff undertaking both a generalist path, but some of you have also chosen an advanced one in both are complementary, as we will see now. We are hoping to have participants who are both can see the angle of the MDGs and the human development from a generalist point of view, but we also want some of you who are practitioners, who are specialists, to be part of this network. And for that purpose, we also have friends from academia and consultants, which we all hope to eventually make a network of knowledge around the issues of the Agenda 2030 and the concepts that were advanced in the Human Development Report. In most of the cases, they have been identified based on the rosters of our regional hub in Panama, but also we have identified technical colleagues from 2 or 3 units that we find that they will have a broader understanding of the Agenda 2030. Some of the recommendations for public policies will be done in Unit 4, and certainly the opportunity to be closer to the doubts, concerns, views, and exchanges of governments and UNDP staff, who can, of course, freely express their and also provide some inputs in this virtual forum. So please make the best use of this, of the time, of the virtual space, and active engagement in the virtual discussions that this forum provides. I also want to thank the team that has worked on this. This is actually the result of more than 2 years of work. It started, of course, with the preparation of the Human Development Report, which was for UNDP, its platform to put an initial analysis on the issues, the entry points, the concerns that specifically relate to Latin America and the Caribbean. In this case, particularly in the Caribbean, there was the report, as you know, dedicated to the Caribbean. And there's a commitment also to transcend the publication itself, that so it is not something that will sit in a shelf and that has, but actually to make his recommendations useful by extracting the knowledge, and especially some special tools and methodologies and analysis and training material that will create a critical mass for governments and colleagues and more interested practitioners to apply them in the context of the Agenda 2030 and the SDG implementation. George Gray Molina, another of the authors, you also heard from Ken Roy Roach, but George Gray Molina, the lead author for the Regional Human Development Report focused on Latin America, will be in the webinar tomorrow. We have today Ken Roy Roach. He is one of the lead authors for the Caribbean Human Development Report. We also have Eduardo Ortiz and Maria Jose, who are both participated in the report preparation. They have a lot of input, but they're also going to be teachers and training in these webinars. And of course, a big thank as well to Alejandro Pacheco, who is the one who is bringing all the parts of this undertaking together and keeping the coherence on both not only the seminars, but the tools, anywhere from starting from the report and going forward. Of course, in our regional hub in Panama, we have Richard Baratum, you heard from right now, and he will also share his views. And working with him, we have an excellent team behind the virtual training, including Wilmer Castañeda, Fernando Galindo, Andrea de la Torre, Natalia Echeverri, and so many others who are working hard, and of course, the team of Matilde Moore, Gonzalo Pizarro, who are all part of our team of experts, of practitioners, all knowledge of people that will be part of this training. So thanks to all of them. So you have already begun to familiarize yourselves with the first training and with Unit 1. You have now most likely we are now learning about one of the several tools available, which is the POV risk. The good news is that other tools that have called your attention, such as the RIA, the combos, the fiscal simulation, and the quantitative analysis, will also be made available in virtual training in the next later in the year. So this one focus on one of them. We're also aiming to have the RIA and combo training 2 weeks after the completion of the poverty risk analysis. And we expect, of course, to deliver 4 trainings during 2017. More than 170 people have joined this first one, which represents a very strong beginning for the network of experts we are aiming to constitute. So this is really very important, to have a critical mass of knowledge, of people who understand the concepts, who understand the technicalities, but can also see it from both from the generalist perspective, but also from the specialist perspective. So where are we going after this? The leadership shown by governments of Latin America and the Caribbean regarding the implementation of the Agenda 2030 is really remarkable. I think that this comes from having been lead voices in the formulation and conceptualization of the agenda itself. So this very ambitious enterprise that we have right now requires enhanced capacities and integrated in interinstitutional responses to multidimensional challenges, which is really what this whole agenda is all about, and where human development for everyone is achieved, beginning those further left behind. In Latin America, this is particularly relevant when we know that we have made advances, but that we still have groups of population that have not benefit from either the growth of the last decade, or are simply marginalized or discriminated, or simply not being part of many of the social programs. So this is the focus of this. We are aware that there's a misleading categorization of the countries in our region as middle-income countries, which is not representative of the development challenges that face the countries, particularly the Caribbean. And we believe, of course, that development challenges do not disappear simply because we cross an income threshold that has been established arbitrarily. So we believe that policies need to be guided by evidence, and that we need to be stronger in capturing and analyzing this data. And of course, this has proven a challenge in the Caribbean. But we are extremely excited to have participants from the statistical and planning bureaus who will be leading many of these actions, and whose inputs and participation will be extremely valuable for all countries in the Caribbean, and especially for this exercise. So we count on all of you to move forward the agenda in your respective countries. The efforts will certainly accompany the extent to which government requests the support, but having also colleagues, experts, consultants, members from the academic community in the Caribbean that can also cross over from one country to another, that we can have a critical mass of expertise and knowledgeable about this, will be extremely, we think, very valuable for the Caribbean to advance as a sub-region. We are convinced that this process will also trigger South-South cooperation through exchanging of knowledge and practice among yourselves. So there's a lot really that very big expectations that we have in the remaining 7 weeks, and we hope you enjoy it, you take advantage of it. There's a lot of our colleagues behind it that we of course are available, but we especially hope that you will all complete the training, that you will pass the exams, and most importantly, that you become part of this network. The network is only now being formed, but the most important part of this network is their participation going forward in helping the countries of the Caribbean. So thank you for your interest and your participation, and I wish you some very fruitful remaining 7 weeks. So over to you, Richard, and thanks again to all the colleagues and participants who are connected.
Thank you very much, Jessica, for sharing your vision with all of us. It has been a clear guide for all of us in the region, UNDP country offices, of course, and the regional hub as well. As regional hub, we support this vision of advancing strategically the 2030 agenda in different ways, actually, and particularly, as some of you know, through targeted support from our different teams that are sitting here in Panama, but also through our network of experts, which is broad and increasing, other regional hubs in the world, and of course, a broad range of partners that we work with in this field. I would like to reiterate a big thank you to the knowledge management team that is worth mentioning, that has been made this training possible under Alejandro Pacheco's leadership. As Jessica said, this is the first of 4 trainings that we are aiming at making available through 2017 to our targeted audience of policymakers, decision makers, and key institutions that can influence positively results and progress on the SDG agenda, on the 2030 agenda. The objective is, of course, to support the design and implementation of policies, programs, projects, and initiatives in general that aim at advancing this agenda. As the training progresses, we will continue to see practical application of these tools. In some cases at the national level, with the support of UNDP teams on the ground that support national initiatives and efforts in this regard. But in other cases also at the territory and municipality level, together with local authorities, which is also a very specific challenge in a region. Our technical staff at the regional hub will consistently support country offices directly, and also connecting countries with solutions that are available, and also assuming the responsibility of quality assurance, which is, I would say, including what Jessica referred to, which is South-South initiatives and knowledge exchanges. I mean, this is one of the key aspects of UNDP corporate support in this field. I mean, we are supporting governments throughout the world in this topic, and facilitating those exchanges is an instrumental part of the accompaniment that we provide. So I would just like to thank you again all very much, and let me now hand it here to our teachers, Eduardo and Maria Jose, who will moderate now the technical question and answer session that you're all here for. So thank you again, everyone, and have a good session.
Hello, everyone. My name is Maria Jose. I'm one of the teachers of this course. I'm part of the team that had prepared the material for this course. And also, I was co-author of the Latin American and Caribbean Human Development Report 2016. For that report, we developed the poverty risk tool that we will explore in this course for most of the countries of our region. So I will give now the microphone to Ken Roy, who will introduce us about the Human Development Report in the Caribbean, and then we will open the space for questions, answers.
Thank you very much, Maria Jose. Thank you, Richard, Jessica, and other colleagues. Good morning. Let me first say that this is an extremely important webinar. And I'm very excited that we're actually making significant progress with the Regional Experts Network. I'm particularly happy that we have a number of Caribbean nationals, Caribbean people who are going to be part of this process and who are going to support us in actually making our support to the Caribbean and the SDGs happen. my presentation is going to focus, of course, on the Caribbean, and I hope to provide some context for the work that we're doing, drawing on the Caribbean Human Development Report, and then hopefully from there we can have some discussions before we move into the actual content of the training, the actual training. So as you know, we've made much progress in the Caribbean in the MDG era, but that there are many structural obstacles, many structural challenges that exist, that continue to exist. And it is known also that the SDG agenda, the new Sustainable Development Goals agenda, is going to be both a challenge and an opportunity for the Caribbean. An opportunity because it presents a multidimensional view of the challenges, of the issues that still need to be addressed. And in fact, there is a lot of coincidence between the SDG agenda and many of the decisions and the priorities that we've been seeing coming from the CARICOM heads over many years. So there's a strong coincidence and indeed a strong regional commitment. The Caribbean, of course, has embraced and adopted the SDG agenda. And one of those remaining, let's say, priorities for the Caribbean is obviously eliminating poverty and inequality. We're really glad that with the SDG agenda, and in particular the principles of leaving no one behind, integrality of economic, social, environmental pillars, and harnessing the benefits of bringing those three pillars of sustainable development together, and with the indivisibility, meaning that the entire agenda is relevant. We're really glad that these are the principles that have been agreed and have been adopted, because they're extremely relevant to the Caribbean. As Jessica suggested in her intervention, in her remarks, we know that 70% of the world's poor remain in middle-income countries. We know that 70% of the world's poor are in middle-income countries, and as you know, the Caribbean is classified mainly, with the exception of Haiti, as a middle-income region. Or, in fact, most of our countries are middle-income or upper middle-income countries, and of course there are a few in terms of high-income countries in the region, and that, as you know very well, presents many obstacles for us in terms of accessing, for example, concessional financing resources, which is going to be critical for advancing on the Sustainable Development Agenda. But let me come back to some of the structural challenges as we see it and as it was highlighted in the Caribbean Human Development Report. You know, of course, that the region for the last decade has had negative economic growth. For the most part, there are a few exceptions, but in aggregate, the region has posted negative economic growth. We know that last year, 2016, the region posted negative 1.7% in terms of its economic growth rate. Notwithstanding, we did have some countries in the region that did post positive economic growth rate, and we were expecting that in 2017 there should be some recovery, some economic recovery. So there's something about the structural challenges and the way our economies are structured and designed that is contributing to us not being able to grow as fast as we should, notwithstanding some of the natural assets and comparative advantages which we have as a region. We also know that we have high unemployment, heavy debt, and of course we're very vulnerable to natural disasters. And in fact, we spend a lot of money in the Caribbean rebuilding, in fact money that we borrow rebuilding after natural disasters. So altogether, a vulnerability profile that says that the region is highly vulnerable to exogenous shocks, be it economic or environmental shocks. Here in this chart, we show that the GDP for the region by country, and we know that many of the countries have been posting, as I mentioned, either very low economic growth or a negative economic growth, with a few exceptions. And we also know that the region has very limited fiscal space, a very heavy debt burden, and that these are some of the factors that have together restrained or constrained our ability to invest in some of the social sector, which if you look at the next slide, if you look at, for example, our social expenditure in the Caribbean, we know that the region's social expenditure, for example, in public health care and social protection, lags behind Latin America and the Caribbean as a whole. And in fact, if you situate the Caribbean in the wider global context, it also lags many regions around the world. So there's definitely something to be said about the low levels of investment we're seeing in public health and social protection, for example, and the low persistent economic growth that we've seen in the region. We believe that this is linked, and we've discussed this in the Human Development Report. This is linked to the inability of the region to sustain the progress that we've seen in the 90s, for example, in terms of our performance in the Human Development Index. The level of investment on the social side has in a way retarded or haven't helped in sustaining many of the social gains. Particularly relevant for this webinar is the issue of poverty in the Caribbean. And in the report, we show that there is very high levels of poverty in the region. Notwithstanding, as Jessica mentioned, the middle income classification, we know that also linked to the issue of poverty is very high unemployment, especially among young people. And definitely this is an issue that requires attention in the SDG era as we go forward. There is also high levels and persistent inequality in the region, which will need to be addressed as we move forward. In the case of the Caribbean Human Development Report, one of the tools which this webinar is going to look at in more detail is the POV risk, where we looked, for example, in the case of Jamaica, at transitions in and out of poverty. And we're very excited about this tool because we believe that this tool can be useful for identifying public policy interventions that can help to prevent people from sliding back into poverty, and that can also help to move people out of poverty, recognizing that the factors that move people out of poverty are not necessarily the same factors that prevent them from sliding back into poverty. So in terms of going forward in the Caribbean, there are some perspectives that we need to take into account. First is this issue of data, the fact that in the region we're not where we need to be. Some countries, for example, when we were putting together the Human Development Report for the Caribbean, we were able to get good data from Jamaica, but for the most part, many countries don't have updated poverty stats, don't have, for example, updated household budget surveys or regular household budget surveys. So there's clearly the need to eliminate some of the data gaps, and there's need for us to focus on ensuring that during the SDG era, we can look at the kinds of data. I understand that CARICOM has a process ongoing where we will agree as a region on a core set of indicators, perhaps tier 1, tier 2, for those of us that are familiar with the SDG indicators, that will allow us to focus on improving some of the gaps and correcting some of the gaps that we see. But more broadly speaking, the SDG agenda, of course, has to be tailored and prioritized, given our limited fiscal space and fiscal constraints. The issue of, where do we make investments, catalytic investments is obviously going to be an important one for the region. And linked to that issue is, of course, the importance of data to know exactly how we are performing in some sectors and where we can do better so that we can make evidence-based policies. And of course, linked to that is the issue of acceleration. Once we've identified where we're not doing so well, and we've identified what are the factors that are preventing us from moving forward as a region, then as you will hear in other webinars, this whole issue of identifying different types of interventions that can help countries to increase the rate of progress becomes important. And as UNDP, we're very lucky that we were able to put together some of these tools that can give policymakers some options for thinking about how to accelerate progress. And then just finally to say that, you know, it's important that we keep the indivisibility of the agenda, that we approach it in an interconnected way, that we harness the benefits of bringing the economic, social, environmental pillars together, that we are mindful of the trade-offs that we need to make in our policy making. And finally, we need to obviously look at what is the sort of public policy architecture that we need to be able to bring these sectors together to benefit from the benefits of integration. So let me leave it there. Just a broad overview of where we are. There is, of course, a very high demand from the Caribbean for SDG support. And at UNDP, we're very happy that we're going to be able to work with experts in the region, with the governments in the region, to respond to this very high demand going forward. So the political will is there, and now it's time for us to drive the action that we require in the region. So thank you very much, and let me hand it back over to Maria Jose, and I will remain here hopefully for another hour or so to answer any questions that may have come up as a result of this presentation. Maria Jose, over to you.
Thank you, Kenroy, for your overview of the challenges that face the Caribbean. This was a perfect contextualization to understand why we need of tools as the poverty risk tool that we are going to see in this course to land Agenda 2030 in the Caribbean region. As Jessica said, policies need to be guided by evidence, and we need to be able to analyze and to capture national data. That is why in this course, we will base our analysis on household data of each country, and we will construct a set of policy recommendations for poverty eradication based on each country context and challenge. So before open the space for questions, I would like to introduce you Eduardo. He will present himself.
Hello, everyone. Good morning there. Hi, I am Eduardo. I was collaborating in the previous report for the Latin American and the Caribbean region. I was a co-author of that report, and specifically designing the framework of analysis for this mobility transitions across countries. It's a pleasure for me to be here again with you in this new project, this course. And yeah, as Jessica mentioned, and as Maria Jose also mentioned, one of the big challenges that we have in the Caribbean is the data, data collection. I mean, when we worked in the Caribbean, it was a beautiful exercise, but it was also a very challenging exercise in terms of showing evidence of the policy spaces that we are going to attack without having longitudinal data, without having a good indicator of monetary conditions across households. We managed to show some robust evidence which will help us to move forward in this 2030 agenda. So in the next, I'm sure, I'm confident that within the next few weeks we'll be discussing in more detail, and I hope that this content will help you all of you. So thank you so much again. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for to all the organizers, especially Alejandro, Kenroy, Jessica, Richard, Maria Jose. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Eduardo. So still we don't have any question, but I would like to ask Kenroy if he can talk a little bit about what in his experience are the biggest challenges regarding data in the Caribbean, and which he think that can be like the big new implementation of the poverty risk tool, which can be different for the Caribbean.
Sure. Maria Jose, I hope you can hear me. I hope I've unmuted yes, I have. Thank you, Maria Jose. I think, one of the challenges we're seeing coming through with respect to the data issue is the whole issue of data and political economy, meaning access to data and, the fact that some countries are not sharing the data that they do have for different political and other reasons. So I think that is one issue, and I just want to very bluntly put it on the table, because I think this one is one that is not necessarily discussed as often and as openly as it needs to be discussed. That's one issue. And then, of course, you have the very obvious issue of limited capacity for statistics across the region, and limited or inexistent mechanisms for collecting regularly the type of data that we need for evidence-based decision making. Many countries in the Caribbean have some statistical capacity, but it is definitely not at the level as we have seen in other parts of the world, and we know that is required for the sort of routine, systematic, rigorous collection of data that is required. The issue of financing is obviously a big one in the region. The inability of many countries to finance the multiple surveys that they know they need to collect, but because of fiscal constraints and the pressures and the demand for investment in so many areas, data doesn't get prioritized as an area for investment. And then finally, the whole issue of human resource capacity across the region. The need to build up. Many countries have said, at least in the discussions I have had bilaterally, that there are not too many statisticians that are available in their countries. So the whole issue of investing in training a cadre of people who can be able to manage this process. So those are some. There are others, but those are some of the ones that have come up frequently. But I think, notwithstanding, I should also say that over the last, which comes a little bit to the opportunities, that over the last few years, we've seen more and more attention being given to this issue. Certainly at the level of CARICOM and the OECS, we know have been making a huge effort to support countries to build up the statistical capacity that they need. There is an ongoing initiative out of the CARICOM Secretariat. We know also that ECLAC has been providing some support to the region in this area, and UNDP, we are also working in this. In fact, there is a lot of evidence that we've collected from the MDG era, which I think we need to give more attention to as we go forward in the region. So there's certainly the political will there. There's certainly the right institutional actors at the table. And I think there is certainly an opportunity in the form of the SDG agenda and the demands of a multidimensional agenda to bring more attention to this issue. So hopefully with these efforts, we will see some progress going forward.
Thank you, Kenroy. Here we have a question from Janet Douglas, a program officer in Jamaica. You can open your microphone to ask your question.
This is Hyacinth Douglas, the National Coordinator for the JEF Small Grants Program. I have, concerns, and it's one of the particular reasons why I signed up for the course, because working with communities with whom I know we have gathered a lot of data.
¿Tú tienes idea de cómo yo puedo escuchar
a lot of data submitting, to the national level? And my concern or question is that with such a program that covers, I think 100 and odd countries, how can we incorporate the SDGs into our program, especially with focus on our database, the indicators that are in our database? Can we include, some of the indicators? Because I can share an example where the data that we collect from our NGOs, government is just, begging us for them. So it's now in the system where SGP has to report to the government on certain data that they gather to help put together the ESSJ, which is the Economic Social Survey that gives you some of the data. And I can understand Kenrick's point when he said countries don't want to share data, and that's the case where government tends to recruit consultants who tend to own the data, and so it becomes a challenge. So I believe we should try and use the hub. I think UNDP, SGP is implemented globally by UNDP. That's probably your first stage to start, because we work with a wide range of partners, not just local communities where we can access data. And so that's something. The other key thing is that the variant in indicators, because some indicators for SDGs overlap with other indicators. So we have to at some point establish well-defined indicators that can actually work, right across region. Because when you have varied data, it makes the data become confusing. You don't know whether and ensure that the indicators that are designed, they are the indicators that give you the data that you really want, and it's also can be used by other countries and different players. I think if we can address some of those, and that's one of the things I'm here, because we are willing to work with our partners, adjust our indicators, because we recognize one of our I think one of our forte is to get information easily from our partners because of how our program is and what it means to a lot of persons, as well as at the national level. Thanks.
Maria Jose, should I respond?
Yeah, Kenroy, please.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you to our colleague in Jamaica for your excellent intervention. Yes, certainly let me say that from the UNDP perspective, the issue of reconciling, let's say, the SDG indicators with our programs at the UNDP level, meaning the SGP and others, is something that we are actively working on. In fact, I can share with you that the new strategic plan for UNDP that we're in the process of developing will use the SDG indicators as the indicators linked to our results and resources framework globally. So those would be the indicators, and this is part of our effort in response to exactly the point you're making, the fact that at different levels you have different types of indicators or different indicators that are being used. So certainly it's something that has to be done. At the global level, there is work continuing at the UN for the Statistics Commission at the UN. There's still some discussions continuing on the data, But I can tell you that what I'm seeing is more and more internationally, certainly international organizations are now adopting the SDG indicators. So everybody's trying to sort of align global reporting and global monitoring around the SDG indicators. This is not to say that there wouldn't be a space for countries to, at the national level, to have their own indicators if necessary. But I think the starting point would be that. Also, let me point out that as part of the MAPS process, in terms of efforts to support on this sort of data harmonization, indicator harmonization, as part of the MAPS, the mainstreaming, acceleration, and policy support process, which is how we are supporting countries to develop these roadmaps that Jessica referred to in her intervention. One of the elements of that is what we call the data ecosystems mapping, where we work with countries to look at the data that they do have, the indicators that they would like to report on, and we do an analysis in terms of where can they get the additional information or the additional data, whether it will need to use surveys or other kinds of approaches to be able to report on the data that they are, the indicators that they're going to report on. And certainly in some countries we've seen requests for support for the high-level political forum, which is the HLPF, where countries are going to present on their progress on the SDGs. We've seen support, requests for support coming to UNDP. So those are some of the initiatives within UNDP itself. I should point out that we have a small team here in New York in BPPS, which is our Bureau for Policy and Program Support. I have to be careful with these acronyms, but it's another arm of UNDP, so to speak, and we have a small data team that is working with countries directly, both as part of the mainstreaming acceleration program policy support, missions, but also in terms of data requests that are coming. So there is an effort. We're not there yet, and as I mentioned in my presentation, CARICOM Secretariat is leading a process with the CARICOM member states to agree to a core set of indicators, which I think addresses the issue of, how do we ensure that we have a core set of indicators across the region, across countries, so that we can be able to compare. Of course, there's some technical elements to that will have to be addressed in terms of, having methodologies for collecting the data in a certain, way, et cetera, so that it can lend itself to a more robust analysis. There was a question about remittances, the progression out of poverty and remittances from Doreen Wilson. Let me just say that in the Human Development Report for 2016, we have touched on the issue of the impact of the suspension or the breaking of correspondent banking relationship with the Caribbean. We believe that this is likely to have an impact on poverty, because when we look, for example, at the analysis on in and out of poverty, I think in the Jamaica case, we did see remittances coming up, and we know generally in our region from IDB and other sources that our region is a big recipient of remittances from overseas. So yes, so it is true. I do, however, know that there is some effort on looking at how to transition from some of the banks, for example, in the United States, where central banks have a correspondent banking relationship with, to maybe European banks. So CARICOM and other government and other institutions are looking at different options for handling this issue, and so on. The question you're asking about Trump and what that may mean, no one knows. Time will tell. But so far, what we know is that from the correspondent banking perspective, there's some efforts to sort of come up with alternatives. We know that there are 5 Caribbean central banks that have been affected by this, but we also know that these 5 central banks have found some creative ways around it. So those are the 2 Dr. Chesney is asking about, is making a comment on one way to address the lack of good data is to promote and support the compilation of national human development reports. Absolutely, we agree. This is something that has to be country driven. So, for example, there are countries that are ready to put together a national human development report, UNDP. This is one of the offers we have. And, you know, since the MDG era, we've been working with many countries to put together national human development reports. So yes, that is one of the things that we are interested in and willing and able to do should those requests come from the countries or the country offices. And then there is a final comment here on regarding investment in public and social sector. In fact, this is perhaps the only graph where Haiti was not mentioned. Does that mean that data are not available, or is it because investments was higher than the other countries? Leopold, let's come back to you on this. Haiti was featured where we did have data, but I'm not so sure if the question you're asking, if it's meaning investments and so on. I'm not sure what's the response to the part in investments, but just as a general comment, Haiti was featured in the report where we did have data. So let me leave it there.
Okay, so thank you, Kenroy, for all your your answers, sorry. And I don't know if there is any additional question. So it seems that there are not additional questions. Well, so again, very welcome to our course. We're very, very happy to have this incredible group of students with very different backgrounds, and we're sure that the experience of each of you in the development of the Caribbean region will be a huge contribution to our course. I encourage you to use our forum to share your experience, ideas, and any comments that you have about the course. And thank you, Richard, Jessica, Kenroy, Alejandro, Andrea, and all the people that was part of this webinar. And also this webinar will be able in our course, virtual course, so if somebody miss it or want to listen it again, it is available there. So thank you very much.